So basically, CCSP is having total 6 domains. As you know that CCSP is basically having 6 domains, starting from the very basic cloud concepts, how we can design the cloud, what is the cloud platform, how we can design the cloud platform, what are the factors we have to consider and all. Then moving on to the data security part, which is something very important. That means how we can basically talk about the security of data in the cloud platform, how the cloud platform and cloud infrastructure is designed by the cloud service provider, what are the factors we have to consider while deploying an application in the cloud platform, how the end-to-end security operations in the cloud is happening, forensic practices and all these kind of things, and what are the legal factors which we have to consider while moving on to the cloud. So basically, I don't suggest you basically going through this percentage thing. I don't basically suggest you go through the percentage things. Why? Because don't go to the percentage. Everything is important. You have to go through it, everything. Okay, that's it. So, and definitely after 2006, actually CCSP has revised the curriculum. Okay, just some fight and percentage, except that everything is same. Okay, so basically this legal risk and compliance, they made it more and more complex, or some topics they basically made everything very much thing. Okay, starting from cloud concepts, architecture and design. Okay, so basically after 2016, what happens is there is a lot of things, there is a few more things basically they have added up. Okay, so basically what happens is in this domain one, okay, in this domain one, it's all about the cloud concepts, architecture and design. Okay, so basically in this particular domain, we are starting from the very cloud fundamentals, or what is the core aspects of cloud computing, and basically what is cloud computing, and what are the factors we have to consider, what are the different cloud reference architectures. See, there is something which is very important. Okay, so we will discuss a word. Let's say for example, I'll give you a word called as cloud platform. So let's say for example, if I host a data center, if I basically have a data center, okay, let's say in my company I have a data center. Okay, how can I basically call this data center as a cloud platform, or how can I basically say this is something called as an on-premises cloud platform? So basically, there must be certain factors which you have to be there if you want to call something as a cloud platform. That we will discuss definitely. Then we will basically discuss about the certain new things called as machine learning, artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, containers. It's a very interesting topic and which is very important in our topics. What is quantum computing and everything. And then we will basically discuss about the security concepts in cloud computing. That means that how do you basically choose a cloud service provider? Okay, so what are the factors you have to keep in mind while basically choosing cloud service provider? How can you basically design a cloud architecture? I'll give an example. Let's take an example here. Let's say for example, I basically go to my AWS console. Just give me a second. I'm going to my AWS console here. Just for information I'm giving, I'm not biasing to AWS or Azure. Okay, so basically you can see that in this particular platform, see, I can deploy a instance. Basically the VM is called as instance in AWS. So I can deploy an instance, or I can create a volume, or I can create a database. I can do anything. How can we do that securely? Like for example, whenever I'm deploying something in cloud platform, I must be basically well aware of the security factors which is affecting that. So basically in this domain, I'll basically show you what are the factors, or what are the best practices for basically designing the secure strategy for a cloud platform. And I'll tell you how can you basically evaluate a cloud service provider. So how can we evaluate cloud service provider? Definitely the cloud service provider, can we go to the cloud provider's data center and do that? No, definitely not. But by which all ways, or what are the factors we can basically use to evaluate a proper cloud service provider? Yeah, and then basically we'll discuss about what are the factors, what are the types of job roles in cloud computing, what are the critical aspects of cloud computing. All these things we will discuss in detail. Okay, then this is one of the most important domains in the cloud platform, cloud data security. I'll tell you the reason. See, whenever you are saying that you are moving to cloud, you are moving two things mainly. First one is you're moving your critical data, your customer data, your company's know-how, A to Z, your data you are moving to cloud, and that is what important. The second one is you're moving the process. Process we can easily manage, but this data, managing the data is a bit complex. So definitely you must know how to secure the data. And when I say the word securing the data, it is not saying basically, let's say for example, if I tell you please secure the hard disk, or if I secure the pen drive, okay, you will say, Krish, we can use these things. Let's say for example, can you tell me one security mechanism you can basically use to secure data in your Windows computer? Okay, you can have a BitLocker encryption. Yeah, that's what it calls BitLocker. Okay, can you tell me some methods in Linux where you can protect your data? There also you can have encryption. There also you can have permissions, case mode, right? Like the same way, how can you encrypt your data which is traveling from one PC to, let's say for example, now I have a data traveling from one location to another, one storage to another. How can I secure that? Like this, let's say for example, what happens? See, I'll give one more example. Let's say, see, all these are applicable. See, I am sending a file from my laptop to Sriram, or let's say I am basically I am currently in my organizational premises. What happens if my data is sending to outside? I'll give an example. So I'm sending a file. Let's say, for example, I am sending a file, and I want to make sure this file is only visible or only opened by those authorized people. I can do that if this file is inside my premises. Now I am sending this file to Deepanshu, I am just sending this file to Yuvraj, I am sending this file to Surya. That came, what happens? When I am sending this file to a user outside your organization, how can we secure it? How can we make sure we have a secure access? We'll use mechanisms like IRM, etc., DRM, IRM, etc. Like example I'm saying. So like this, we'll discuss the different levels of data. See, data is having different life. We will basically discuss about, we call it as CSUSAD, create, store, use, share, archive, destroy. Okay. So basically that's what we call as how the data is basically, what are the different stages of data? How can we basically delete the data in a cloud platform? It's not easy basically. In the on-premises, you have different mechanisms where you can remove the data. But how can you guarantee that your cloud provider is removing the data? So basically, how can you securely dispose your data? How can you basically effectively allow which user is allowed to access your data? Which user is blocked? What is identity and access management? How can you basically restrict the access to your data? And in the cloud platform, what are the different types of storage you have? Fish, do we have different types of storage in cloud? 100% yes. Let's say in your PC or laptop itself, you have a cache memory, you have registers, you have a virtual memory, you have a RAM, you have a hard disk, you have a SSD, you have a pen drive, then you have something called as a what do you call that? Let's say NAS box, you have SAN. So you have a lot of things like that. Like in the cloud platform also, you have hundreds of storages, out of which we will basically discuss about the different types of common storages available in the cloud platform and which is the best use case. Let's say I'll give an example. Let's say, for example, see, so you're aware of the platform called as Netflix team. So basically Netflix, I'll give an example. So Netflix means, let's say, for example, I basically open Netflix. Example, when I'm basically opening Netflix, okay, when I'm basically opening Netflix, when I click on a movie, I'm able to watch the movie, right? That means that, let's say we have 24 users here. Maybe all these 24 users will be using the same movie. So how can I basically manage the traffic to that particular file? How can I make sure that file is available to all my users? Let's say a movie can be accessed by lakhs of people, millions of people, the same file. How can I make sure that particular file is basically available to everyone? Just an example. CDN will get availability, but how can I make sure that file is able to manage all this traffic, that single file? So like this, we have a lot of constraints. Or let's say, for example, I want to host an application, which is the best kind of storage for that. I want to have a shared storage, which is the best kind of platform for that. So it is not what, see, I'll give an example. Let's say in AWS, you have a storage called as EBS, Instant Store Volume. Then you have something called as S3, you have a EFS, you have a FSX, you have something called as, let's say, RDS, database storage, cache storage. You have a lot of things like this. In Azure, you have the same thing. In Azure, we have a managed disk. In Azure, we have a temp disk. In Azure, we have in the same thing, we have something called as a blob storage. Here we have a file share. So here we have a SQL storage. Like this, everything is same actually. You go to AWS, you go to Azure, you go to Google. Everybody is providing the same kind of things, just the name changes. Let's say you take a coffee, you make it strong, you call it as cappuccino. You make it light, you call it as latte. The same thing, nothing more. The things are always same. But how will you choose? Let's say out of this 10 storage I have here, how will you choose the best one for your specific requirement? That is what we will study in this particular different type of storage. And you don't have to basically memorize all these names, but after my session, you will be able to memorize definitely. Okay. Then basically, I'll tell you how can we basically make sure encryption is there. And whenever I say the word encryption, people say, Krish, if you have encryption, you are secure. That's a lie. If you have encryption, you're not secure. If you have an effective encryption, you're secure. Effective encryption means ensuring or implementing encryption in a very effective strategic manner. Then you're secure. Or how can you basically get an IRM solution? What is a DRM solution? How can you basically work on that? Or what are the factors we have to consider for having a secure logging or how can we basically have an event log and everything. So all these things we will discuss in domain 2. But I found domain 2 is very much interesting actually. Then we have a domain 3 actually. We have a domain 3. So basically in domain 3, what happens is, okay, in domain 3, what happens is we will talk about, let's say, this is a domain which is more onto cloud providers perspective also. We have to understand the difference between virtualization and cloud computing. That will be discussed in the first domain. So I have seen some people say, Krish, now virtualization is not out of the market. Some people say this actually. Krish, virtualization is out of the market. Basically, now it is cloud. Or some other people will say, Krish, virtualization out of the market. Basically, containerization is what matters. So understand that all these guys are relying strictly on this virtualization only. Still now also. If there is no virtualization, there is no cloud. Okay, cloud is there because we have virtualization. Example I'm saying. So I'll discuss about what is the difference between virtualization and cloud. What are the risk factors which we have? How can the cloud provider give you an effective infrastructure? How can basically the cloud provider differentiate security controls? What are the concerns which we have specific to the cloud platform? See, when I say the word security of the operating system, you can say 100 things. Krish, update it. Krish, patch it. Krish, install an anti-malware solution. So you can say 100 things to me. But like the same way, what all additional things are there in the cloud platform that we will have to discuss? Cloud specific risk we will see. That we will discuss in detail. Then this is a super important thing, identity and access management. So this question is very important thing. Let me show you an example here. I hope all of you are able to follow. If anybody is not able to follow, you have to tell me, because this is just not to listen, you have to understand. Let's take Netflix for some time. So let's say you can see that I have 3 servers running here in my AWS account. I have 3 servers running here. Just an example, 3 servers. I have 3 servers running. Then I have a lot of storage running. I have a lot of database running. So can you tell me what is the single point of failure for all these things? What is the single point of failure for all these things? We have everything in the cloud plan. What could be the single point of failure for all these things? If one thing fail, everything will fail. What is single point of failure? Oh no, internet is fine, definitely that. No. I'm talking about our concern. If this console is compromised, if my AWS account username and password is compromised, then what is the use, right? Got my point? See, let's say this is my AWS console. I enter my console using some username and password, right? If my AWS credentials or my management console or Azure portal is compromised, means everything is compromised, right? How can you avoid that risk? How can you make sure you can basically avoid this kind of hassles that we'll discuss here? Then we will discuss about how can we have an effective, this is super important thing. When I take my AWS security, when I give AWS security training and all, this is some point which I always trust in depth. Why? Because people think, Krish, it's a very simple thing. But I am sure that if you are good in this thing, you are master in security. Identity and access management is something which is very critical and which requires a very good mindset to design. And then we will discuss about how can we plan a proper business continuity and disaster recovery as well. Okay, that's the basics. Then we have domain 4. So some people say this domain is a bit tough, but now it's very easy actually. They made a lot of changes actually. So basically I'll tell you why this domain is a bit more easy now. Why? Because let's say when I am developing an application, team, I'm just giving an overview, okay? I'm not teaching you anything. I just want to make you familiar with these things, that's all. So let's say, for example, I'm going to develop an application. Example. So when I say developing an application, what is the first step? Requirement analysis. You have to understand why this application is there. Starting from that, till the application is released, from A to Z, we basically design something called as a SDLC. I hope some of you people know this, software development lifecycle. When you deploy an application in cloud also, you have SDLC. But there, as we are security professionals, there we have to follow something called as secure SDLC. And just one more thing I want to tell you with this. So when second last batch when I was taking the batch, okay, one student asked me that, Krish, from the very day one, you are saying everything is unsecure, everything is risky, everything is problem. So I am saying from the very first day that this is risk, that is risk. I am saying everything as a risk and issue. Then why do we have to move to cloud? Definitely that question is relevant, I know. First, from the day one, we are discussing, okay, this is security risk, that is security risk. Why? Because we are security people. And for a security person, you have to consider each and every factor as a risk. See, you have nowadays you have a model called as zero trust model. I think some of you people know this. Otherwise, I'll share with you. Zero trust model. There's no word called as trust in IT. Zero trust model. That means the whole point is never trust, must verify. Let's say, for example, the cloud provider is telling you that, okay, the cloud provider is telling you that, don't worry, customer, I will basically do everything for you. Don't trust them. verify it. Let's say they are saying, don't worry, we will basically handle your application properly. Don't trust them, verify it. Let's say you say that this firewall will basically protect everything. Don't trust, do pen testing. So like this, you have to basically define the process of developing an application for a cloud platform. Then you have to basically know what are the factors which are required for you to migrate an application from on-premise to cloud platform. What are the functional and security requirements you have? How can I verify a software? How can I basically verify the API, which is the godlike thing in cloud platform? All these things we will discuss in detail. Then we have the domain 5, bit more easy domain. You will feel a lot of topics repeating in this. Okay, how the cloud provider is basically building the cloud platform. How can we make sure the cloud provider is complying with the requirements? How can we do forensics in the cloud platform? Because why? Because basically what happens is, if it's on premises, you have access to everything physically. You can basically control that, you can manage that. But when you go to the cloud platform, you don't have anything access to, we don't have basically any access on premises. So how can you basically control that? How can you basically do the forensics if there is an issue? How can you manage a SOC? How can you basically have a proper security controls? How, if there is an incident happens, how can you manage? So basically everything we'll discuss in this particular domain. But whenever we are discussing something, you will feel like, okay, this particular topic is onto a cloud provider perspective also. And finally, legal factors. And this is one of the most riskiest in the cloud platform. Whenever you're storing your data in the cloud platform, whenever you're handling any kind of things in the cloud platform, what are the legal and regulatory factors which apply to that? I'll give an example. Let's say for a very simple question, team. Let's say for example, I have a company registered in India. Okay, my customers are in Europe and the data center is in Singapore. Okay, so don't forget, I have a company which is registered in India and my customers are basically from Europe and the data center is located in Singapore. So in this case, which law I have to follow? Indian law, Singapore law, or European law? Which law I have to follow? Basically, you say Europe. Some people say, okay, European law will come in picture, Indian law will come in. What if there is a conflict? Definitely, when you work in the cloud platform, we have law of the land, definitely. But basically, a lot of legal factors like this will come. How can you address this? That's what we study in this domain 6. Okay, basically, all these kind of factors you will study in domain 6. What are the types of audits you have? How can we basically do everything in a regulatory and compliance perspective? How can we basically manage the risk in the cloud platform? All these things you will study in domain. What I'm trying to tell you is, how can we effectively plan that like that? I know that definitely it's a legal decision, but basically, how can we plan accordingly? How can we make sure? Definitely for legal decisions, we have to contact a proper legal authority for that. Okay, that's it. So that's about the domains, team.